This is Cold Start.
For today's episode, I thought it would be a fun time to do an automotive would you rather. So taking a list of cars in their own little categories and seeing if our automotive tastes between a handful of vehicles, which one we would pick, and see if our opinions align or if we have to argue our case.
I think we've played this game informally a lot of times. I think most car people kind of sit around like, would you rather have this car or this car? And of course, there's these other examples of the would you rather game that are sort of inane, like the Reddit, would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses, I think?
Yeah, we're not going to get that off the beaten path here, but as an automotive enthusiast, we've all answered that question at some point of what is your dream garage if you were to pick 3 cars? So this is kind of like that, except we're going to take 3 cars and be like, which one would you choose? Just like at the beginning of Gran Turismo or Forza, where you get your free car and there's like 3 options. It's like a drift car, a hot hatch, or an old muscle car. What are you going with, right? So we're going to go along those lines.
You know, I think there's a lot of these cars that are really easy to identify as, I totally want this one versus that other car. I mean, no question. There's some capability or attribute to it. I'm just like all over this thing. And then there's other ones that's a lot harder. And I had a hard time thinking about one versus the other, or even fleshing out what are the 3 things that are alike enough that are worth comparing to each other. Because you can compare completely irrelevant and unrelated things, and then it's just a hard decision and it doesn't seem like it's coherent.
Yeah, making this list, I kind of had half the fun was coming up with what are going to be the 3 vehicles. How can we make things competitive between it? Because obviously there's going to be the simple answers and we all have our tastes and we all have our opinions. But yeah, like you're talking about, finding those obscure comparisons of whether those are hypercars, supercars, standard cars, or shitty cars. What if you had to have an option between 3 shitty cars? Which one are you going to go with?
More than once in my life, I've had an option between 2 or 3 shitty cars. So it's kind of fun to be able to replay that a little bit and say, okay, so if they were this bad, which one would you take?
Yeah, so I think we should start kind of in the middle. Now, this is a comparison. This is a trio that obviously is near and dear to my heart, and I think is a good palate cleanser in getting us ready for the list to come. So the first one, imagine you're in 2008, you're a businessman, and you need a V8 saloon.
Well, there's a couple of options that come to mind, but what are you thinking about here?
So I'm thinking it's going to be between a BMW E90 M3, the C63 AMG, and the Audi RS4. So all of these, 4 doors, naturally aspirated V8s. The BMW and the Audi, you had the option for manual transmissions. Mercedes was an automatic.
And so this is that mid-2000s era C63, right? Because they have further versions of that in the future that I think were twin-turboed V8.
Yeah, we're talking like 2008. These are all like showroom fresh.
All right.
You're a businessman. You just got promoted to whatever managerial rank that you get to pick the sweet car to go to the office.
You mean you're now one of the 14,000 vice presidents at this bank you work for or something
Exactly,
like that? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I've had such different experiences around these cars. I actually owned an E92 Coupe, so I know what that's like. I've not owned the C63 or ever really spent much time in those, but they were cool when I'd been around them. And the RS4 I have the most experience in because back when there was the racing school at Sonoma Raceway called Sim Raceway, they had an RS4 as their safety car.
Which those things are sick. So like the RS4 out of this list is the lowest production car, right? The other 2 were kind of main productions. The RS4 was pretty unique for Audi to come out with this naturally aspirated V8 under the hood. It had those nice fender flares.
Yeah.
Some of those like brushed aluminum accents like the mirror caps and stuff like that. Pretty rad cars. Factory Recaros.
Yeah, it looked way sportier than the A4 and the S4 versions, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Audi had that tendency to kind of come up with the slightly better line that wasn't differentiated enough. So the S versus the A didn't really do it. But then they came up with the RS, and you're like, okay, now I can get my head around this.
Oh, 100%. And I think it was the same V8 that they used in like the first gen R8s.
I think in the R8, that's right. So, I'm not a huge Audi guy, but I say on this list, that RS4 is really popping to me. Like if I was going to go look aftermarket right now for one of these cars, It'd be between the E90 and the RS4. As much as the C63 is compelling, I don't know. I think I'd pick the Audi.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Like the C63 for sure might be like the better daily car, right? Automatic transmission. It's pretty usable. I think it's the most powerful out of the three on this list, but it doesn't have that kind of like wow or special factor behind it where the RS4 and the BMW M3 both have high revving V8s, which for a driving experience arguably is better. I think the RS4 makes you feel more special because it is kind of that like rarer vehicle. Doesn't have as good of a driving experience as we know with Audis and Quattro. They usually understeer just because how far forward that engine has to be. I think you already know where I'm going with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say I know you're going to pick the BMW. But the Mercedes has 2 liters of displacement over the Audi by comparison, and for the BMW as well, right? You're talking a 6.2 liter naturally aspirated V8 in the C63 versus a 4.2 liter V8 in the RS4. And what's the size on the E90?
4 liter.
4 liter. So
yeah, the Mercedes in this list, more powerful, faster 0 to 60, but
automatic
only.
only.
Yes, that's the only option. In typical Mercedes fashion.
This is a really good tripartite comparison. I think you picked 3 really well-class comparable cars for this one. Well done.
Yeah, well, it's like the total conversation between Mercedes, BMW, and Audi, German sedans. How do those manufacturers really distinguish themselves? And I think that this trio really highlights that of like Mercedes usually has pretty good power, great luxury, really usable on the day-to-day. The BMW probably doesn't have as nice of materials in the interior, so you don't have that luxury focus, but BMW really focuses on the driving experience. Then you go to the Audi. Audi is always known for their all-wheel drive systems, so now you have an all-wheel drive. So if you're living up in the mountains or you need that all-wheel drive system, Audi's going to be more for that. It's a little bit more usable if you're an outdoorsy type. And I think also Audi does a really good job, like you're saying, with their special editions, making them seem very special and collectible. I could definitely see like the RS4 holding its value maybe a little bit better than the other two. So it's a pretty strong comparison.
Yeah, I think I just have a soft spot for that RS4, having ridden around in it as the safety car at the racetrack. Now that I look at the specs alone, like having not driven all 3 of these cars, the C63 is really compelling as much as I don't want to lean in on that automatic.
I don't think there's a wrong choice in this list. I think for me, if I had to rank them, it would be obviously E90 first because I have one. I've gone through this decision. I made my decision. The RS4 would be a close second. I had a buddy that had one and it was modified, lowered, exhaust. And every time I got in it, it just felt special and it felt really, really cool. And that engine that's under the hood has a lot of character just like the E90 M3 does. Now, from the Mercedes perspective, yes, they're cool. They can do massive burnouts. They're powerful. They're rad. They can sound really cool if you put an exhaust on them. But for me, it just doesn't have that like flair that I want out of a car.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, that's sort of like the personality differences, if you will, between BMW and Mercedes and Audi. They've each got their own flavor, and independent of the models of cars, I'd be more of like a BMW chooser here, and probably BMW and Mercedes over the Audi, but that particular Audi was really special, and it makes this a really tough call. I'm going to stick with the RS4.
So, moving on to the next. Let's switch gears a little bit. Away from the German stuff. I think that favors me a little bit too much here. So,
are we going JDM?
Let's go JDM.
All right.
Like the first one here, this is like JDM icons. I'm sure the audience is already seeing this coming, but let's do Mark IV Supra.
Gotta be Mark IV Supra.
The 2JZ one, for those that don't know the marks of the Supras.
Right.
The Supra you're thinking about, the Fast and Furious Supra, not the modern one, not all the other weird ones that no one cares about, the one you're imagining.
And then you have to say, if it's going to be the Supra, it's going to be the Mazda RX-7, the FD.
FD, so same generation,
yes,
same years. And then to wrap it up, of course, we got to include Godzilla. So then the R32 chassis Nissan GTR.
Yeah, man, this is a tough one, too. I mean, the 2JZ gets all the press among these groups. Not to say that people don't call out the Godzilla and people love their Mazdas, but I think in terms of bang for buck, yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one, too. I think the Supra catches my eye. I've just seen so many of those that have been souped up and modded out to like 1,000 horsepower and see them driving around. They still have modern lines. They're kind of muscular looking and it still seems fresh. The R32, I think, looks the most dated of these 3.
Really?
Yeah, if I look back on these, like that FD RX-7 was such a timeless and beautiful design, and it was like they designed a car from the future and nobody knew how to appreciate it yet when it first came
Yeah.
out. So I think that the Supra, again, muscular lines, but not as elegant maybe as the RX-7. The R32 is kind of awkward.
Yeah, I could see where you're coming from with this because the Supra of that generation and the RX-7 were very rounded design, very kind of sculpted, smooth lines.
Right.
Where in comparison, the R32 is still kind of boxy, still kind of has like 80s vibes,
Yes.
even in the 90s.
Yeah, I think that's the carryover I'm thinking about, where it's like this is an evolution of a car that's been around for a long time. And we've seen that evolution. We see those slight tweaks in the design over time. With the Supra, it was more like revolution, not evolution in the body style. Like every single generation of the Supra looked totally different. Then the RX-7, another car that changed the way it looked a fair bit generation over generation. And they got it so right with that FD. And then they came up with that successor of the RX-8, and it just looked like a piece of crap.
Yeah, the RX-7, I think, in the lineup is pretty easily the best of the
looker.
RX-7s.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, with this list, it's kind of interesting within the JDM world. Each one of these cars has their like own little subcategory within JDM. So like for me, at least, the FDRX7, I always see it as like the tuner's car. And in the essence of handling or potentially building out a drift car, something like that, right?
And
where the Supra, equally a very, very tunable car, but more like high horsepower, straight line. Like you don't look at a Supra and think that car's going to handle really well.
Yeah.
And then the R32 is kind of somewhere in between where, yes, you can make power out of them, but the R32, for me at least, it has that awesome motorsport lineage in Group A racing. And it got the name Godzilla. Out of all the GTRs, the R32 is the one that earned the name Godzilla because it was so dominant on the track. So for me at least, because of the motorsport heritage, and I think one of the most gorgeous and the coolest liveries, paint schemes, whatever you want to call it, that came out of motorsports was on an R32 GTR when it raced, and it's that HKS livery with like the teal and the purple. So like I just want an R32 GTR for the excuse to like put it on some like white wheels and put the HKS livery on it and make it look like a Group A car. So for me, GTR.
I mean, that's super iconic. There's no question about it. And in terms of the power delivery, right, out of the box versus what's tunable, the R32 was kind of a beast right off the bat. The Supra was powerful, but like it was really about the tunability of it. And then the RX-7, same kind of thing. Plus you have that rotary angle, which made it just weird and different in that same way. Kind of like the way the air-cooled VW Beetle guys are. They're deep into that world and they can make performance and all that stuff, but it's just a weird, quirky world different than the others that were sort of comparable. And I think the RX-7 is kind of that way. So yeah, I mean, if it was just up to me, the R32 carries the exotic quality. Of course, you're going to have a right-hand drive vehicle if you bring one of those over to drive versus the other cars that were produced in North America, so you can get a left-hand drive version of it. The upside of tunability, yeah, Supra, I think of street racer, drag racer. I mean, you could drift one. You certainly have seen them out there doing it. But
Yeah, for sure.
Nothing compared to like what you see with the RX-7 in terms of drift mobiles.
Right. Which, I mean, like this list, we obviously go the route of like, do they have to be completely stock? Do you get like a little budget for some mods? Like, I don't know what the rules are completely here.
I say the rules are up to us. So let's make them, we're making a decision based on a completely stock vehicle, but also with the potential of what you could do to it.
Okay.
So don't assume out of the box it's been modded, but like if you get that car, it's up to you if you want to do stuff to it.
Okay, yeah. So like if you get it, you don't have to keep it stock.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, fair enough.
So what's our next grouping?
All right, so the next grouping. So obviously, once again, that's a list of cars you're not going to lose, right? They're all fabulous. So let's make it a little more challenging. Let's make maybe the crappy versions of that JDM Legends list. So let's go like the generation previous or even 2 generations previous.
You're talking like the Mark I Supra here.
Well, A60 Supra Celica is considered the Mark II Supra.
Okay, now I can get my head around it. Okay, so Mark II Supra was still the Celica Supra. I always think of that first gen A50 model, the A40, A50, as the Celica that they created a line of Celica they called Supra. And then it didn't come out to be like its own car until that Mark II, where they actually put Supra on the back really big.
So Supra was like a trim package?
Yeah, the A40, A50. So my dad had one of these. It was a black one. and it said on the side Celica Supra. And the car looked like a Celica, but it was a little different. It was sportier. And the Supra was like a trim line on the Celica itself, and then eventually went off to kind of fork off and be its own type of a model.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So I guess, yeah, this next list is 2 generations previous of the previous list. So with that, so we have the A60 Supra, the Mark II Supra. Then it's going to be the FB RX-7. So there was an FC, but we're going to skip that one because that one's kind of cool. The FB RX-7, not cool.
This is the real pointy one that originally they called it the SA, and then they moved it to be the FB, like they were like the early and the late cars.
Yes. So it's kind of the second gen RX-7. So SA was the first generation.
Got it.
That one looks terrible.
The kind of reptilian looking thing.
It almost looks like a Ford Pinto on the rear.
Like a Ford Pinto and a ugly like 260Z had a baby.
100%.
Yeah.
So not that one, the generation after.
Yeah, okay.
Looks somewhat better.
Okay, so the FB RX-7 versus the Celica Supra.
And then to wrap it up, so for the Nissan, instead of an R32, it would be an R30. But for this list, if we look up an R30 GTR comparative to those other two, I think everyone would agree that the R30 GTR is cooler by a lot. So we're going to do the R30 2000 GT, which is basically like the Japanese Econo box from Nissan.
Yeah, this is the really like squared off 80s looking version of this car.
Yeah. And so this is all like the 80s, the early 80s versions of the Supra, the RX-7, and the Skyline. It's going to be the like just normal sedan version.
All right. Well, just going on the interesting factor here, I think the R30 Skyline takes it for me. The A60, or we talk about the A40, A50 Supra, either one of those.
A60.
Okay. Never really did it for me. I don't think they have great lines on them. That big wide hatchback doesn't look so good. The FB RX-7, I just have to kind of squint when I look at it. It's not a good looking car. It's not got a huge amount of tunability upside, really. I'm all R30 Skyline this round.
It's funny because, like, when I had to look this up, I feel like these are all the forgotten generations.
They totally are.
Of an iconic lineup of cars, of RX-7 Supra and Skyline. Like, no one talks about an R30 Skyline, but I would agree with you. There's kind of something there. It's kind of cool. It's really boxy. It's totally 80s style. If you're thinking about like modifying a retro car and kind of making it cool, like the R30 Skyline is a set of coilovers and wheels away from being pretty rad,
right.
Where I feel like I agree with you, the FB RX-7, there's a lot of stuff you'd have to do to make that thing look good. And then the Celica Supra is still in the early generations where like, I'm sure that thing's just going to fall apart on you.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. These are getting to be pretty old cars at this point, and as much as we want to collect them and keep them in good shape, the overhead of doing that gets a little high over time. So we've done German, and we've done 2 rounds of JDM. What do you got next?
Well, the next one, I think, is it's a nice little mixture of modern and used cheap enthusiast car. So this would be a good debate for maybe a high schooler, someone getting into college. What would be a fun, like, first enthusiast car?
You didn't call it a track car, right?
No, enthusiast car.
Enthusiast car. So
on the new end would be the new Toyota GR86.
Those are pretty sweet.
Or a Honda S2000.
So we're going 2 ways with this comparison. Yeah, the S2000 gets held in really high regard. I mean, considering that's a 25-year-old car right now, the amount of energy and interest that there still is out there for them is pretty great.
The Honda S2000 is a very kind of raw analog experience for that front engine, rear wheel drive enthusiast car. Yes, all the S2000s are convertibles, so that maybe could potentially be one downside, but you can get a hardtop for them. They do look really cool, and they have a bunch of modifications you can do. You have this high revving 4-cylinder that sounds actually really good, and they're pretty fun. They actually have a almost perfect 50-50 weight distribution. They're very agile, great handling characteristics. And then on the other end of it, you have the GR86, which it's going to have all the modern stuff of a modern car, but it's not going to have that like raw connected experience. So it's the two philosophies of, are you a new car person? You want the Bluetooth, you want the comfortability, or do you want that kind of analog raw driving experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think just based on that, I'm S2000 all the way. There's also an argument for Honda cars. And now, Toyota cars aren't to be sneezed at either. I mean, they're
Right.
just reliable as
Yeah.
hell. But in terms of holding its value, like if you look at an S2000 today, they're pretty much the same price they've always been.
See, okay, you're going from the financial perspective of like they've already depreciated.
It's a consideration, right? Like how much
100%.
bang for your buck you're getting. They're both cars that you got to rev the crap out of to get the power. But
Yep.
that's what makes them kind of fun. I don't know. I feel like I need to add a Miata to this mix because that seems like the other enthusiast car that spans these eras. And you can look at like an old NA Miata from when the days of the 2000 were out, I think. Maybe the NB. I don't know them that well. Or you can look at a more modern one as compared to like the GR86.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that would be a perfect third to add to this to make it a trio. For me, it'd be very easy to like rule out the Miata right off the bat because you already have like the convertible roadster with the S2000. I would argue that an S2000 is better than any generation of Miata. I think it's a little bit cooler. You have a little bit more cool factor than a Miata. So definitely would rule out an MX-5 or a Miata right off the bat. I don't know. It's pretty tough. I feel like I'm going to go new GR86. Like a 1-2-year-old GR86. It's got a little bit of depreciation out of the way. I think the styling on the new generation one is pretty sick. And the interior is actually like really nice, like surprisingly nice for a Toyota.
I think they've done a really nice job with it. A little part of me makes me feel like, it still looks kind of like the FRS BRZ that they had last generation.
Yes.
And it's an evolution of that. And they could have changed it more. Like, I think they could have really done more tweaks to the body styling and so forth. But I think the package they came up with overall was pretty good. It is definitely more exciting to me than a Miata. The S2000 still remains pretty compelling, but in terms of usability and some of the modern features and just all those other things, I don't know. The GR86 is a compelling package.
No, 100%. Like, I think, once again, it's whether or not you love that kind of like raw driving experience. You're going to get that more out of an S2000. I've driven an S2000. I've also driven a brand new GR86, and I was really impressed with the GR86. Like, I drove it, and I was like, this kind of feels like a modern rendition of my E36 M3. Of course, I'm going to bring it back to BMWs. I got to.
You got to have that baseline.
It just felt like simplistic. It was like, this is everything I want, nothing you don't need. The interior, like I said, was pretty nice. Like, it was actually an enjoyable place to be. Now, I think practicality, day-to-day usability, the GR86 is going to have more of that. I don't think that it's going to be like, if you were to modify both those cars, an S2000 and a GR86, I think the S2000 is going to be more exciting, 100% all the time. But overall package, I think GR86 is a little bit better.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, this is another good comparison. I like the GR86 a lot. One other thing here is the S2000, as far as I know, nobody's ever decided to make a whole race series or a class out of these cars, where you can go find, MX-5 Cup all over the place. The GR86s are starting to get a lot of traction. You're starting to see them pop. That never really happened with the S2000s. They mostly remained track day enthusiast car. They never quite got to the level of proper motorsports platform. So there's something to be said for the Miata and the GR86 from that perspective.
Right, yeah, those are two main manufacturers that developed those cars with enthusiasts in mind.
Right.
But if you do get a brand new GR86, make sure to put in some oil baffles. They can oil starve if you hold them one direction for too long where the oil pickup is.
Of course, the BMW guy knows all about that.
About oil.
About oil starvation. Your car had suddenly less than half a full tank of gas on the racetrack. You better go get more gas. Otherwise, it's going to go into limp along mode. And you're going to wonder what's going on because all the fuel jumped to the one side of the tank, not where the pickup is.
All right. Well, I've come up with a lot of lists. I'm going to pass it over to you. What do you got brewing? Give me something difficult here.
All right. I'm going to go to that sort of like mid-high range performance vehicle sports car, but not the top of the top. Like those are really easy. We'll get into those comparisons. I'm thinking something like a mid-20 teens or even 2000s AMG GT, a 911 Carrera S, let's call it a 991 era, and the Audi R8 V8.
Ooh. So this is like entry-level supercar.
Pretty much.
This is like bare bones, kind of bottom dollar. You just have enough to like kind of look cool.
You entered the market.
Yeah,
you got your foot in the door.
So it's you're picking your lineup. Are you gonna go kind of like the V10 Lambo route, but you can't afford a Lambo, so you go for the Audi one? They're a little bit cheaper.
Some people like the V8 better.
Are you a Porsche person? You just want an entry level into Porsche?
It's the S. It's not the baseline. You have a little bit of a power boost over the base model.
This might be like a pull out of left field, but to be honest, I've always thought that the AMG GTs are kind of cool.
They have good look. I think the hood's a little long.
They're weird. Are they better than an Audi R8 or a 911 on paper or on track? Probably not. But they're kind of cool. It's got a long bonnet. It's got a long hood. Sitting in one, you feel like you're over the rear axle. It's kind of a German Viper, to be honest. And for whatever reason, Dodge Vipers have always struck my interest of just being this kind of like cool, weird car. And also, like, think about it like on the day-to-day. How many AMG GTs do you see? Not very many. They're kind of few and far between.
I think this is era specific too, because the early versions of these, right, they were inspired by that SLS version that came out.
Yeah.
They had the gull-wing doors on it as a throwback to the 300 SL.
Yep.
They were really seeing this as a showcase car when it first came out. They were really going for that. We're going to compete with the 911.
Right.
The Viper comparison is interesting in that the lines of the car, like the hood is enormously long on this thing.
Right. Yeah, it's more of the proportions.
Yeah, it reminds me of that in the cartoon Family Guy, you know, the car that Peter Griffin drives into the tunnel over and over again.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. The AMG GT is that car. It just has that look to it.
100%. For whatever reason, I've always had a soft spot for like interesting, sporty Mercedes. Because like you think about Mercedes-Benz in general, and they usually create just like bare bones German commuter cars.
Or big, comfortable sedans.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like they don't really come up with like sports cars very often. It's like Lexus creating the LFA. There's just something cool about Lexus and Toyota like going off script. I always get that feeling when I see like a really cool Mercedes.
It's the same vibe, that luxury car. Like we get so excited about like the Cadillac V version.
100%.
Same idea.
And so like an AMG GT for me, like the Mercedes side of it is kind of cool. They sound really cool. They're also comfortable, so you can live with them on like a day-to-day, and they're kind of low-key.
Yeah, in terms of livability and low-key, the 911S, I think, takes those things easily. I think it's also kind of boring. Like the 911S is just like not the baseline, but it has a little bit more power. There's nothing really distinctive about it. Like you can't look at a 911S on the road and go, oh, that's obviously a 911S, not a baseline, not a GT, whatever. They just are kind of in the middle of the pack. And to the extent that they get that reputation for being kind of a boring, you know, dentist car, whatever it is, I guess the turbo usually gets that. The 911S kind of falls in the middle of undistinguished, decent 911s. I mean, they're all good cars, but like this is not the one that sticks out to me as particularly exciting. In particularly that 991 Carrera S just looked like any other 911 to me. I don't know.
Right.
And then the R8 has had a different design philosophy than these other cars for a long time. It definitely looks like a mid-engine car. Just the orientation of things, that big blade that kind of goes down the side behind the door, those things kind of distinguish it and make it look continually different. But again, it's looked the same for the last 20 years.
Right. And I've always seen like the R8 as the introductory supercar for the masses.
Yeah.
And it is like, for me, very connected with like the Lambo group, which has their own stereotypes.
Well, I guess they shared a lot of parts.
Yeah, well, I mean, like an R8 is the exact same thing as
Gallardo,
a Huracan.
Right? Or Huracan, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, well, the modern ones, right? The generations before, the R8 was the same as the Gallardo. They were identical. And then as they progressed and they grew up, then it was the new generation R8 is identical to the Huracan. Now, back to my philosophy of a brand creating something that they wouldn't usually do. Like the first generation R8, I remember when that car came out and like Audi was once again one of those German manufacturers that just created sedans and coupes, like nothing super exciting.
Yeah.
And then here they came out with this supercar, the R8, that you're like, whoa, like you wouldn't expect Audi to produce that.
Right. This is the company that brought you Quattro. You think of as a rally car. You think of as a car with giant triple wing on the back. You know,
right.
That's not at all what the R8 was. So it was a big surprise to everybody when it came out. But among this group, I still fall back on that Audi's a little bit sterile and numb in a way. Like I know I picked the RS4 earlier, but that's because it was such an unusual Audi. Right. I think given this threesome, the AMG GT is really compelling. As much as it's a lot of weight up front, you know, weird kind of a shape to it. I think it's the one that's the most interesting.
Yeah, I feel like it's overlooked a lot, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when it first came out, it was such a clone of a 911. People just saw it as like, oh, that's Mercedes' 911. Okay, it's not as good as one. Just look at the specs. But then you kind of look at the overall and the way these things have evolved over time. And I don't know, the AMG somehow has stood the test of time. Now, you can't say that's not the case about the 911. And the cars look the same since the 60s, plus or minus.
Right.
With a couple of generational changes. But I don't know. I'm among these, the 911S just ceases to be particularly interesting. And this is being said by a guy who's into Porsches, into 911s. I think the AMG GT wins this round.
Well, look at us coming to agreement.
How does that happen? Okay, let's go up a notch. So we're talking supercars, and there's ones that people think about, the Holy Trinity. I mean, we can go ahead and tick that one off, but let's wait a minute on it. Let's get more interesting. Let's go back a few years, and let's go to like the early 2000s, that era that we've talked about together before as calling the golden era of cars. Just enough technology to make them amazing, but not too much that there's screens on our way or things that are nannies that are all intrusive. So I think we have to call out the Ferrari F40, the Porsche Carrera GT, and the Lexus LFA. I mean, you could put the Enzo into this group, but then maybe the F40 doesn't fit.
Well, for this listed, I think CGT, the Enzo would be the 2000s, and then same thing with the LFA. But I like that we would include the F40 here because, like, now we're just talking about, like, halo cars.
Right.
So cars that just are, like, mega cars, mega collectors cars, which, I mean, like, even the LFA on this list really wouldn't fit into that, like, mega collectors because I think you can still get LFAs for less than $1 million.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I would say include all of them. F40, Enzo, CGT, and the LFA, but say that like the market value is identical.
Yeah, ignoring price, this becomes a much more interesting comparison. And I guess I didn't realize, and it's something to be said for the F40, how much older it is actually than these other cars. Right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you had F40, F50, then you finally got into Enzo.
Right, right. And so we're talking early 90s, and the other cars on this list are really early 2000s by comparison. In terms of how they look overall, the F40 is a stunner. I mean, we have to acknowledge that.
Right.
It's a poster car for multiple generations of car enthusiasts coming up. And
Right.
I think in a way, the Enzo, while it was such a halo car when it came out, with time, people have maybe softened on it a little bit. I think the lines are a little pointy and maybe a little bit polarizing compared to the F40 lines, which I think are sort of iconic supercar lines. You can't overlook the CGT here either. Just beautiful, unusual, but a little bit marred maybe by the front, like a little bit of that 996 variant kind of creeping in that we don't
Right.
like as much. Maybe the LFA was the odd person out here, the odd car out. Had to compare it to the CGT just because it's the V10 comparison.
Right.
But you know what? Let's take it out of this list. This is what I'm going to say. Let's hold the LFA for later. Let's do a V10 comparison later.
Okay.
But let's say we're talking CGT, F40, Enzo. I don't know. That's not a great comparison either because we got too heavy on the Ferraris. I might want to blow this one up entirely.
The funny thing is I was going to go LFA on this list.
Really?
I was going to do a total hot take. I really like LFAs just because going back to that conversation of a brand doing something so weird and off the wall, and Lexus is never going to create something like what the LFA was. Now, the one downside of the LFA is the transmission, right? It was only a single clutch automatic, and it was in the early days where it was kind of clunky. Nowadays, we can look at it kind of like the Murcielago and be like, it's got character.
It's
right?
an experience.
It shifts, it gives you drama, time, and then it slams the next gear, where we're so used to nowadays of dual clutches and things happening instantaneously. Now, if the LFA was a manual transmission car, could you imagine, right? I think if it was, LFAs would be trading similar to CGTs in regards to the market value. I know we were going to exclude price. And I think that's where I was coming with this of like that I would choose an LFA if like the price point was identical, that like you couldn't sell the car and like get the market value out of it.
Yeah.
I just think it was so weird. Like the CGT, yes, is unbelievable and it's phenomenal, but maybe this is me being like, I don't want to go with the mainstream and what everyone else thinks. Like I kind of want the weird thing off in the corner that no one's really talking about.
I get
and that
that.
is for sure the LFA.
Yeah, I don't know. The LFA lines just don't have that aesthetic beauty to me. Like they're interesting. It's cool.
Right.
It's wedgy. It's different. It gets the vote for different. But there's some things aesthetically. I mean, the CGT is a beautiful car.
Yeah.
The F40 is an extraordinarily beautiful car. The LFA is not. And if I could nitpick, that triangular exhaust configuration, no bueno, man. I don't like it. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, the LFA is a little bit more brash. It's not as refined. Like, the LFA really has nothing like that's significant about it comparative to the other cars. Like the Enzo, it's phenomenal. It's spectacular, right? F1 technology, whatever you want to call it. The CGT, F1 Le Mans technology. The F40, race car technology. LFA, it really didn't do anything. Like,
It's a Lexus.
It's just a really cool V10 in a Lexus.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think in terms of what made this car distinguished from all the others, we call it out because of the sound of the engine, right? That V10 from the LFA has been called out as maybe even better than the V10 sound from the CGT. But that's really it. There's nothing else distinctive about it. Like you said, the transmission's not particularly great. You know, the interior of the cockpit hasn't been called out for its design. It's not a race car for the road the way the CGT is. It wasn't derived from motorsport the way the F40 was. It's weird and quirky, and I can hold it up in its own regard and say that's cool and interesting, but man, it just pales in comparison for me.
So interesting enough, I had to search this because I was wondering, I was like, how many LFAs were made? Because there can't be that many.
They had a hard time selling them.
Lexus lost money on every single one that they made, so they were not in a rush. So they capped their production.
Okay.
So they capped their production at only 500 units.
Oh, wow.
Where you want to talk about not selling well, CGTs, the Porsche was actually planning on building 1,500 units. They only got to a little bit over 1,200.
Yep.
So in regards to collectability, LFAs are rarer.
All right.
So that's the only argument I can have to plead my case that I'm sure I would get shot in the streets of saying that I would pick an LFA over a CGT or an Enzo or an F40. That's the only thing I can have is that there's only 500.
I'll say I accept your analysis. That's a fair way to look at it. Limited edition always seems like kind of a weak way for me to call something out as being special versus the others, but okay.
Oh, it's totally weak. It's totally weak.
But this was organic at least, right? They didn't make that many. They weren't going to make that many. There wasn't so much demand for it at the time either. I think people couldn't get their head around, wait, you want me to spend how much on a Lexus, on a Toyota? Whereas with the Porsche, they had that problem too, but people had associated in their minds a little bit more with Porsche with like a luxury high-end brand where you'd spend the money for it. So while we're talking about rarefied air, let's just go ahead and get it over with. The Holy Trinity, right? That's the McLaren P1, the Porsche 918, and the Ferrari LaFerrari. This is an argument that's been had 1,000 times. What are we going to bring to it to be different? And it was Supercar now add hybrid capability on top of it for each of these three cars.
Right, yes. That was also the introduction of hybrid technology in the quote-unquote supercar realm, hypercar realm, whatever you want to call it. So all three of the vehicles had a hybrid system.
And it sort of telegraphed the future for performance cars, because if you look at what are the fastest, highest horsepower, highest output cars that exist today as production cars, I think they're all hybrid of a really powerful combustion engine combined with very powerful electric engines.
Right. It's funny how like the previous list to this list, like the previous list was like all the big engine naturally aspirated cars, V12, V10s. The F40 excluded because it was a V8 turbo.
And it's a small engine by comparison. It was only a 2.9 liter, yeah.
But like you're going from like the mid-2000s supercars to now
The mid-2010s.
hypercars. This one for me is a very easy choice. I'd pick a P1 every single day of the week. I don't think that the 918 was like that exciting.
And the heaviest, I think, too.
And to me, like, it just doesn't have like the curb appeal that the other two cars have. Like, I've seen 918s in person and they're not that like breathtaking. I've seen a Ferrari LaFerrari, really stunning. Now a P1, unreal. Like it's sick. And everything about the P1 and being like the successor to the F1, which for me is such an iconic car as well, the P1 for me just does it all. I'm not a big Ferrari fan. Like a Ferrari LaFerrari, like, yes, it's really cool as a Ferrari and it's unbelievable as a car, but like I'm just not that big of a Ferrari guy to like jump on board.
Same here. I think the Ferrari LaFerrari gets the aesthetics right. It's just a beautiful looking car. It's the kind of thing that looks pretty timeless, even though it was of a specific era, and you can kind of see the lines from that era sort of evoked. But I think as an all-arounder, just beautiful car. The 918, I agree with you, didn't really have anything that was so distinguishing from other things that had come before it. It was sort of derivative of a few different Porsche models. The coolest part for me was the fact that they added that vertical exhaust in the rear, where it was like right behind the cowl. The exhaust came out vertically out of the rear deck. pretty cool. You don't see a lot of production cars with that kind of setup on it. My understanding is they actually had to develop a new coating technology for the rear spoiler because the heat of the exhaust gases that would blow toward the rear wing could melt it. So they had to do something special there. So that was kind of cool. Performance-wise, decent, but heavy. Like if I come back to what these cars should be, ultimately the highest performing sports cars on the planet, they shouldn't feel heavy. And that was a complaint we heard from so many people in the 918s. They had the battery technology that made them faster. The base engine was a 600 horsepower engine, really cool, but more than a decade before they came out with a 600 horsepower engine in the CGT. There had since been the GT2 RS in the interim. So there's other cars that could be held up comparably to the engine base that was in this car, and they added the electric to it. The P1, I'd agree with you. It had the most whiz-bang, the most super unusual things going for it. For me, that giant rear wing that would act as an air brake was one of the coolest things to see. Just under heavy braking, that car would flip that wing up and use it for braking. That stood out in a way. The lines on it, too, as much as it kind of looks like all the McLarens, because all the McLarens kind of look the same and they kind of have all the same engine, this one was the first one that looked markedly different, even though it was on that same platform.
Well, it started that design language. Everything after that mimicked the look of the P1. Because if you think about like the MC-12C or MP-12C.
MP412C.
Right, whatever that thing, the printer McLaren. But that one, comparative to the P1, they don't look anything alike. And then everything after the P1 just kind of looks like a P1 in a different way.
The headlight cutouts that had the McLaren logo sort of like embedded into it. I don't remember that on the MP4. Now I'm going to go back and look and see. It's going to probably be there already. But yeah, I think the P1 just kind of blew doors in terms of performance, in terms of design. McLaren also had the halo of the F1. The McLaren F1 that came out in the late 90s was held as such a poster car, such a halo car. I mean, to this day, it's the most expensive modern car you can buy. So it's obviously held in high regard. So I think there's parts of the P1 that call back to that lineage and that heritage that people are so fond of. Yeah, for me, it's P1 also. As much as a Porsche guy, you think I'd go 918, that's not my choice. Well, speaking of McLaren F1, let's go back to the older versions of these cars. We didn't have the term hypercar at the time, but these were cars that were being used for motorsport. So let's take the McLaren F1, the 911 GT1, and the Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR.
So this is like the GT1 homologation cars.
Correct.
Pretty heavy hitters. I mean, honestly, this is a pretty tough one for me because I think all of them are sick, and GT1 racing was awesome.
And I think we have to take the valuation out of this. Otherwise, you go take the F1, and then if you wanted one of the other cars, you could sell it and buy 10 of those.
Right. Aren't Porsche GT1s, like the Strassen versions, aren't those like super rare?
Really rare. They made all of 20 of them, I think.
Where the F1, like you can get an F1 if you have the money.
They're out there. They can be had. Not just the one that Mr. Bean keeps crashing.
Multiple times. And then the same thing with the CLK GTRs. I don't think they made very many of those either. I think they just met whatever homologation rules they needed to make to be able to produce those cars for the track. Yeah, this one's really tough for me. I think out of the three, the least gorgeous looking in regards to just aesthetics is the Porsche.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The front end is effectively a 996 racing version.
Right. And the thing is, like, the Porsche one is cool because it's such a weird thing for Porsche to do, but it doesn't really have that kind of like aura behind it like, to me, the other two cars do.
Yeah, it kind of looks like they took a 911 and just kind of heated up all the plastic and stretched it way out, and that's where they came out with this GT1 version of the car.
Yeah, it looks like it's made out of Play-Doh.
Yeah, I get that vibe. And then
Play-Doh designed.
The CLK GTR also has a little bit of that, but they did it in such a beautiful way.
Right. And the CLK GTR, there's two versions of it. There's the Roadster and the Coupe. Hopefully we're only talking about the Coupes.
Yes.
Because the Roadsters are a little interesting for my taste. They don't come with roofs.
They're different.
You can't put a roof on them. So I think out of these three, F1, I think everyone knows how amazing the F1 is and all of its pros. But I think out of these three, just for kind of like the visual essence of it and what these cars represented, I would go with the CLK GTR.
See, I'm right there with you. One of the things about the F1, and people are going to string me up for saying this, but like I think the F1 isn't that special looking in some ways.
100% agree.
I I know there's people out there going, what are you talking about? It's the best looking car ever made. You look at it from the rear, and it's not distinctive. It does have that McLaren look like we eventually got with the MP4 12C laser printer version that came out. But the headlights look like they were ripped off from a Ferrari or maybe like an old dude Tommaso or something like that. I don't even know.
Yeah, I think the design of the McLaren F1 is timeless, and it's classy, and it's beautiful. But as we're talking about these GT1 homologation specials, it doesn't have that weight like the other two cars do. Now, yes, my choice would be the Mercedes CLK GTR, which is so sick. What would make this conversation even more interesting, because the McLaren F1 in regards to GT1 racing was kind of the first to the field, and then Porsche and Mercedes started to develop their cars to further compete with the F1. Now, the CLK GTR is like a long tail. I think you can see where I'm going with this.
I know where you're going with this.
So there was F1 long tails. They were called the F1 GTRs, and they did make a street version to meet FIA homologation requirements, and that was called the F1 GT. And it's essentially a GTR long tail without the wings.
How many of those did they make even?
3.
3.
So there's 3 that were ever made.
Damn.
One of them was like an in-house car that they used for marketing purposes. One of them went to the Sultan of Brunei. Shocking. And the third one went to a museum, I think, in Japan. And that one has been repainted since and is in, I believe, in private hands.
And this is different than the LM.
Correct.
Which was the Le Mans edition that they came out with 5 cars.
Right. And that one was the same body style as the F1, so same kind of like stubby tail.
Right.
And they added wings. And then there's also a high downforce HDK F1. There's some special F1s, but the F1 GT, to me, is the sickest version of the F1 ever. And I like, hands down, I would take an F1 GT over 2 CLK GTRs.
You know, we're talking about things that are rare as hen's teeth at this point. There were so many things about the F1 that were also sort of pushing the envelope, right? Wasn't it the first production car with a carbon fiber monocoque chassis?
I think so.
Pretty sure. And I think right up your alley, didn't they start out with BMW engines?
BMW powered, baby.
That's what I'm saying.
Just circles back. If there's any sort of connection to BMW, I'm in.
Yeah, no, I think we were both so quick to go to the CLK, but now that we're talking it out, well, there was this version and that version, and well, that one version of the F1 might be the one I'd pick. So it's kind of not so clear cut. So we've only scratched the surface of this comparison of would you rather among 2 or 3 or 4 cars that have something in common. I think there's so many more we can do, maybe some really obvious ones like the Holy Trinity cars, like others that we could kind of compare to each other and give our unique takes on. But I'll bet there's a lot of other ones that we just haven't even thought about.
Yeah, I think it'd be more fun to get away from maybe the mainstream categories that everyone always thinks about, and car enthusiasts will argue until the end of time, like the Holy Trinity, like those stereotypical JDM legends, stuff like that. I think it'd be more fun. We should get a little bit more creative next time we do this, of just kind of oddball cars. If you had to, what would you be willing to deal with at the end of the day?
All right, I'll just put this one out there and we could let this brew, and it'll just kind of like be fodder for the next time we have this conversation, all right? VW Microbus, Myers Manx, BMW Isetta.
I think you already know where I'm leaning.
Is that weird enough for you? You're going to go with the 3-wheeler. You're going to pick the 3-wheel car.
Come on, it has a fridge front door. What's not to like?
BMW dies hard with it.
All right, we'll dive deeper into that next time. This has been Cold Start, another episode diving deeper into car culture.
Hey, thanks for listening. Really fun. Thanks, Silas.
Thanks, Todd.
See ya.